result of somebody's sexual orientation rather than action, some action they had taken, something they had encountered, a microbe.
We had this hotline on Castro Street. And this patient would turn up. The minute he did, the hotline would light up. He's here, he's having sex with people, he tells them he has the gay cancer.
By the end of the summer of 1982, Kaposi sarcoma was summoning a huge amount of attention and upset in San Francisco. Anybody with KS lesions who continued to go out would draw attention. And given that we know that Gaetan did not like to be told what he could or could not do, it seems quite likely that he would draw attention.
Gaetan Dugas was very comfortable going to various public health people to talk about his disease. He met with Selma Dritz, and according to Selma, she counseled him that he should not have sex, that he was perhaps dangerous. And he said, "You're not going to tell me how I should behave."
I told him that he was getting other people sick with it. And he said, "It's my right to do whatever I want, my civil rights."
Gaetan had different beliefs about his condition. His approach was, show me, prove to me how this disease is transmitted. And if I'm doing anything that is transmitting it, I may acknowledge it if you can prove to me that this is the case. I don't remember what triggered me to call Air Canada, but I did call Air Canada. I wanted to talk to the medical director and find out if there's some way to limit his ability to travel.
A doctor telling us we've got to start, watching what we do sexually, and that there's, it's troubled, and we got to, curtail our activities.
I totally understood the terror that gay men had about AIDS pushing us back into the arms of the medical establishment.
It was only in the very early 70s that homosexuality was no longer seen as a disease. It was taken out of the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. And so doctors had always been trying to cure us.
The flight attendant in 1982 looked terrible on chemotherapy. Like death warmed over, he had lost hair and weight. Nonetheless, Dugas' attitude carried him through. He was always hopeful and kept saying he would beat it.
I can remember sending Gaetan encouraging letters. I have a card that he sent me in January 1982 when he's feeling depressed about the loss of hair, saying he feels like an alien.
96% of all the people I saw then died. Smallpox, Ebola only killed 60%. And we were talking about virtually everyone was going to die.
Had that been happening to any other group in the society, there would have been massive hysteria all over the country, And in fact, what we got was total silence.
It's more like what happens in a war, where, all of a sudden a whole generation of people, are put in this incredible danger, and many of them died. It was such an extreme difference from people who are like 25 and look 25, and then in 5 minutes they looked 95.
It's terrible because it's a slow death in a way, and you see the body basically decompose in front of your face. A beautiful man is turning into nothing.
There's a fellow actor named Joe Capetta that became ill and died fairly early on, who was hospitalized. The food service worker wouldn't bring his tray into the room, just set it on the floor outside.
A lot of hospitals, especially outside of San Francisco, they wouldn't let the partner come visit their lover in bed as he was dying because he wasn't a family member. they didn't want you around at all. They were ashamed of you. And you did this to him probably.
We were being vilified by the media, by right-wing politicians. I mean, we're truly vilified. But then we have to remember that there were mainstream figures who suggested putting gay people with HIV in camps, tattooing HIV on our bodies.
If the only way to stop it is quarantine people, I don't think there's any way around it. I think they're going to have to do it.
Lovers were thrown out of their boyfriends' apartments. They were not allowed to go to the funeral of their partner who had died. It's really grotesque the way that people behave. You know, very much in the same way that in 2016, you said, who are these people who voted for that man? You knew who those people were back then in the 1980s. They haven't gone away.
I mean, the Reagan administration simply didn't want to acknowledge the problem. It was said at the time, and I think it's true, if the outbreak had occurred in a heterosexual population, they would be all over it. But it was easy to marginalize gay men at the time and say, well, who cares? There was an interview done with Larry Speaks, who was the press secretary to President Reagan, where he was asked about the AIDS epidemic, and he said, what's that?
Does the president have any reaction to the announcement of the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta that AIDS is now an epidemic in over 600 cases? And over a third of them are died. It's known as gay plague. No, it is. I mean, it's a pretty serious thing. That 1 in every 3 people that get this have died, and I wonder if the president is aware of it.
I don't have it. Are you? Do you?
You don't have it. Well, I'm relieved to hear that.
Do you? You didn't answer my question.
Well, I just wondered,
how do you know?
Does the president, in other words, the White House looks on this as a great joke?
No, I don't know anything about it, Lester.
Does anybody in the White House know about this epidemic, Larry?
I don't think so. I don't think
Nobody knows.
There's been no personal experience here, Lester. I checked thoroughly with Dr. Ruge this morning, and he's had no patients suffered from AIDS or whatever it is.
Patient Zero was clearly a very helpful person to us. He didn't have to be. He didn't have to give us the names of his sex partners, but he did, and that turned out to be extremely useful because it allowed Bill Darrow to contact those people, follow up on them, find out who else they had sex with, and construct the cluster.
But then we wanted to see how far the cluster went. We only had information about Los Angeles and this one out of California case. So I went up to New York and I followed up on the 72 different partners that he named. The important thing was to try to show that there were connections between Los Angeles cases and cases in other parts of the United States. Here's the original drawing on a piece of yellow paper about case 57, which was the person later referred to as the out of California case, and a drawing showing connections to exposures with a case in 1979, a case number 40. Here he is going to Toronto. Here he is at NYU. So here, case 57 is described as a 30-year-old flight attendant from Toronto.
I lost contact with Gaetan for a while. The moment he left for Vancouver, and I saw him once. He was running through the terminal, and we embraced and we chat. But he had very, very short hair at the time. He had a few spots on his face.
And I noticed that there was a fairly common theme that essentially Gaetan in Vancouver was the personage, the face of AIDS. And it just seems so ludicrous.
There were stories that Gaetan was having unprotected sex with other people. And it was reported that he was in the bars and he was going home with people and this sort of thing. And AIDS Vancouver felt like they needed to have some kind of response to address what these rumors represented.
I do remember specifically having a conversation with him about promiscuity and bathhouses and et cetera, et cetera. he said, people just don't get it. Because if I was in the bathhouses the way they say that I'm in the bathhouses, I'd be exposing myself to all kinds of random opportunistic infections. I don't know much about it, but I learned when I did go to the bathhouses or have a lot of casual sex, I used to come down with things and they were hard to get rid of. So I just stopped doing it. He wasn't having casual sex.
Good evening. I'm Michael Pappas with Channel 10 Gablevision Vancouver. There was a recent panel discussion in Vancouver. On the panel were doctors and other men associated with the AIDS problem. An overflow crowd attended, seeking information and other advice as to how to deal with the AIDS problem in Vancouver. On the panel that evening was Dr. Brian Willoughby, who explained.
AIDS, the disease we're here to talk about today, then, is a new phenomenon wherein people's ability to fight infection is defective.
They had brought in a person from the gay men's health crisis in New York City.
What brings me here is our concern over an epidemic that is killing gay men all over the world.
The doctors presented as much, I think, as they knew, and my recollection is they tried to be pretty scrupulous about what they didn't know.
So one of the things you can do to decrease your risk of contracting AIDS is to decrease the number of different sexual partners.
There was almost disbelief in the room that was something that we needed to do because it was a New York thing or a San Francisco thing. It wasn't a Vancouver thing.
The things we do know about it in terms of who suffers from it certainly suggest that it is some kind of infection.
We, the panel, talked for maybe about an hour, 10 or 15 minutes each, and then the floor was open for questions.
See, last year, Congress gave us AIDS. This year, screwing around gives us AIDS. What's going to give us AIDS next year? This is my question.
Can I take this question?
Go ahead.
Screwing around doesn't give somebody AIDS. I mean, it does and it doesn't. In other words, every contact you have, you're increasing your opportunity of being infected if, in fact, this is a contagious agent, which has never been proven.
I believe there's some kind of tests being done on AIDS in Vancouver.
Attending that forum affected my life very, very distinctly, in as much as the concept of safe sex was introduced, and I started to practice safe sex, which is maybe perhaps one of the reasons that I'm still here today.
And probably the third or fourth person to get up had a French-Canadian accent.
A man went up to the mic. I only saw him from the back, and that was Gaeta.
The hepatitis vaccine, the new vaccine that is now offered to gay men, has been developed with gay men hepatitis. So therefore, anyone who would receive such vaccine could be exposed to AIDS.
It was a little difficult to understand exactly some of the concepts he was trying to convey, but what I appreciated about his interaction there was that he was standing up for himself.
So you shouldn't fear someone who has AIDS or have symptoms of AIDS because there is no specific reason why you should get in contact with AIDS with infectious agent.
It sort of took the tone, how can you sit up there advising people to have less sexual partners to avoid an infectious agent when you don't even know that this is caused by an infectious agent? Which, on face, is a valid question.
Like if you had a lover who had AIDS, and you don't have AIDS, what is the warning you give to people?
All studies indicate that, and it's not everybody, so there is a chance of risk involved. But the majority of the people are fairly promiscuous.
It wasn't my place to say, get him off the mic, but I could tell that it was turning into not a public information session, but a kind of battle.
Okay.